We have more for your ears only. I'm David Alpern.
I'm Eddie Robinson with this quote from the news. I told buyers I think they're overreacting to this so-called doomsday thing, but I respect their decision. That was Zhongfu Yang, a Chinese businessman, on selling fully equipped floating survival bubbles to Chinese citizens, particularly of a Christian sect, to survive the end of the world on December 21st, as predicted by an ancient Mayan calendar, but incorrectly it would seem. Now this.
The message is clear from the Security Council to all the forces inside Mali to get together, to have a dialogue that is comprehensive, that is inclusive, and that will allow the resumption of the constitutional order. That's the thrust of the message that is contained in this resolution of the Security Council.
Morocco's UN ambassador Mohamed Lulichki talked about peace in Mali last week as current president of the UN Security Council, but the occasion was a council vote to send an African-led military force to help the government there beat back Islamist rebels. Meanwhile, Islamist fighters from Somalia were blamed for attacks on ethnic Somali areas across the border in northeast Kenya. But Amnesty International also accused the Kenyan government of unlawfully starting to move 500,000 Somali asylum seekers and refugees out of urban areas into overcrowded refugee camps.
For all of that, the latest issue of World Policy Journal reports that Africa overall is becoming a more peaceful and economically prosperous place after centuries of savagery and exploitation. To talk about that transformation and other international issues for your ears only, we're joined again by WPJ editor and former CBS and New York Times foreign correspondent David Andelman. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
David, first give us your reaction to the Security Council intervention in Mali. Enough manpower and firepower to make a difference?
Well, it's a good start. The problem with any UN peacekeeping force is that they're designed to keep the peace rather than make any peace. So when we raised such a question in our previous fall issue, with UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon about a possible standing force of a UN army of some kind, he totally rejected the idea. He said that the UN is not in the habit of fighting, rather simply of restoring and keeping the peace. Well, the UN wasn't in Libya, it hasn't been in Syria, nor in Iraq or Afghanistan. My fear is that Mali is another quagmire for which the UN is neither prepared nor has the stomach. And terrorist gangs like those in Mali are prepared simply to inflict havoc and wait them out. So it's very possible they'll just sit there, they'll wait them out, and not very much will change.
Cross-border violence also figures in the Journal's interview with Rwanda's President Paul Kagame. What does he say about charges of wrongdoing in the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, and what's the evidence?
Well, basically, he points out that Congo has 9 neighboring countries, and that problems in Congo and these other nations inevitably flow back across the borders of each of them. But in the end, it's Congo that has to deal with them. At least that's what he says. He does suggest that he has good relations with that country's leaders, and he hopes a solution can be worked out to problems that spring from frictions among ethnic factions in these tense border areas. But in the end, it is really in these borders areas, the Hutus and the Tutsis ancestrally at each other's throats that continue to be a problem.
Kagame also boasts of progress after a notorious area of genocide. Talk about some of the developments of which he seems proudest, including the role of women.
Well, there's no doubt he's proudest about the fact that the Hutus and the Tutsis, at least in his own country, who spent decades slaughtering each other, can now live together in apparently productive harmony. And that, he believes, is his greatest single accomplishment. And it certainly is. I mean, he was, after all, a general in the armies that went after each other, and as productive development and growth in a nation that was once Africa's basket case. That's all going on there now, and there have been many byproducts, especially the important role of women, as you suggest. 56% of its members of parliament are women, the world's largest percentage, and all of his top aides that we saw that were dealt with us, they've all been women too.
Progress in Africa more broadly is fostered by new technology, from cell phones and the internet to underground mapping of water resources. Give us some basic economic benchmarks for Africa and some examples of this mobile revolution.
Well, we do chronicle quite a lot of these in this issue. 6 of the 10 fastest-growing nations in the world are in Africa right now. Mobile technology is bringing the telephone to many of the most remote jungle areas where it would have been all but impossible to string landlines in years past. So We've charted and mapped that, and as well vast underground aquifers across the continent. Many of the most drought-stricken areas have these underground water sources, and if tapped by new technologies, they could provide water for drinking and small-scale farming where none were ever available before. So lots of hopeful signs in Africa right now.
Underground oil and the technology to extract it can still prove a mixed blessing, however, and as you report from Nigeria.
Yes, there's no question of some real hazards involved in ill-regulated exploitation of potentially highly polluting resources like oil and gas, as we found in the Niger Delta. And that's one of the largest and easily accessible pools of oil in the whole world. But their entire ecosystem is being ruined, perhaps irrevocably, by oil companies that have shown little regard for their surroundings or the people who live there.
Nigeria is also under attack from an Islamist militia. Talk about that and the degree to which offshoots or franchises of al-Qaeda are developing roots around Africa and maybe resources for new international terrorist attacks.
Well, the Boko Haram terrorists have all but taken over entire communities in northern Nigeria and dug themselves in. They're making themselves all but impervious to outside attack, or for that matter, outside interference, even by natural allies like al-Qaeda. Still, they are developing criminal resources and expertise that are quite international in scope, and there are few clear ways of eradicating them.
International threats are also a subject of the magazine's Chat Room feature, an interview with Iran's foreign minister. What does he say about the impact of ever-tightening economic sanctions aimed at stopping Tehran's nuclear program and the threat of a military intervention?
Well, Ali Akbar Salehi is the foreign minister. He is also, that some people are saying, he's also potentially the next president of Iran to succeed Ahmadinejad. And what he says, and he's a real realist. He's a graduate of MIT. He was Iran's ambassador to the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, for many years. What he's saying is the people of his country recognize that they are in a war right now. And it's necessary, in order to fight this war, to put up with certain problems. And these problems include these sanctions. So they're willing, at this point in time at least, to subject themselves to these sanctions for an ultimate victory.
David Andelman is former CBS and New York Times foreign correspondent, now editor of the World Policy Journal and worldpolicy.org/journal.
Quote from the news, I wonder what the rest of the world will think. We now have a dictator's child as leader both in North and South Korea. That was Seoul office worker Kim Min-jin on the election of South Korea's first female president, Park Geun-hye, daughter of the late ruling general Park Chung-hee.
Next, top films of the year for your ears only.